Hi everybody. This is a little bit of an unplanned video today because I was originally planning on showing you how I colour just using drawing pencils, but I ended up having to do some overtime for work last night, so I didn't really have as much time to plan as I really needed. So I thought there was a comment in my last video, and I do apologise for not having time to go back and reply to all my comments, but even if I don't reply, I do read them all, and there was a comment in my last video saying that you might like to see how I actually got the effect of the stone that I got in this image here with Alice in Wonderland, made it look like the statue. Somebody did ask how I got this effect of the stone, so I thought maybe I could bring that in and do a video on that today. So what I've done, I do actually have this image in the actual Alice in Wonderland colouring book. This is by Jasmine Becket-Griffith. So what I did, I scanned in the image from this book and I've printed that out, and I thought I could maybe show you on this copy here how I was getting that kind of texture, that stone texture, to make Alice look like a statue. It was right at the beginning of the month of August, before I actually went on holiday, so I can't remember exactly the colours I was using, but the same sort of colours would be what I would use if I was going to do it again. And I can show you the same kind of technique to get the same kind of effect, even if the colours are not exactly the same. And I thought maybe I could do that as a quick little video today, because it is a really quick and pretty effective technique, I think. So I'm going to show you on this copy of the picture here. I have actually gone ahead and filled in a little bit of it there with a marker, because I did use a marker base. I'll just bring in the original again here. We can see that marker has turned out a little bit darker than what it actually did in the book. I'm pretty sure this is the same marker. I did do a little test down here of the two that I thought it could possibly be. Either of those would work. One's more of a greener grey, this one is a cool grey. So I'm not entirely sure this was the marker that actually I used here, but the same kind of thing, a light grey would actually work as a base. So even if this one isn't exactly the same, I think we can get something working. So I'll zoom us in and I'll show you how I was getting this kind of texture going on here, and we'll see what we can make happen. Okay, I've zoomed us in a little bit closer there. And the marker I ended up using for the base that I've gone ahead and done here, this is a hoo-hoo marker. It's CG2, which is Cool Grey 2, 2. Cool Grey, like two eyes and then a 2. It's this one here. I think this has turned out slightly darker than the one in the Colouring Heaven magazine, but this is different paper. This is just sketchbook paper, so that could be it. I'm thinking maybe why this marker looks a little bit darker than I remember it being. And I have actually just printed this out this morning. I didn't quite have enough time to leave it overnight and let the ink dry, so we have got a little bit of smudging going on. But I think we can work with that, and I can show you how to get this texture I had going on. I will say that as we're trying to get this kind of stone texture going on here, it doesn't really matter if your base is a little bit blotchy. But I will say that if you do kind of keep a more scribbly sort of motion going on when you're doing the basing, that way if the streaks do dry and still show when you're done, then it won't be as bad. It won't be as much of a problem, because we do want that kind of scribbly, blotchy kind of effect going on with our stone Alice here. I'll just do this little bit of a hair just to show you how I was doing the texture there, filling in the base. And yeah, if you just make sure that your pens are not going all in a straight line like so, because having the straight lines going across, that would be a bit more difficult to work with. We can see there kind of where the layers of the pen are crossing. We don't really want that straight line, so if you go ahead and do a more scribbly kind of texture like that when you're filling in your base. Not that I'm any expert at markers or anything like that, but I found, yeah, that does help. If you want to get this kind of stone, sort of scribbly texture going on, that's the best way to be doing the base. And the marker, as you see, does dry a little bit lighter than when you first put it down. But any kind of a light, sort of cool grey, I think would probably work for this effect. You could try a warm grey. I haven't actually tried doing this with a warm grey. To be honest, this is the first time I've actually tried doing this effect on a big scale. So yeah, feel free to experiment with any kind of grey in the background there. And basically all we're doing to get that stone texture is scribbling with various shades of grey pencil. And again, I'm not entirely sure which were the exact colours that I used for the original. We just take a closer look at the original there. Maybe we can see that scribbly texture coming through a little bit now we're closer in. I'm not entirely sure what pencils I used for that, but I've picked out a few greys because I seem to remember just using 2 or 3 different colours along with the Polychromos black and white. And I've picked out the pencils that I think I was using just from memory, but I do have some spare greys here. I've picked out all the greys from my bag of pencils that I have nearby, the ones that I use most often. I've picked out all of these, but the ones that I think I remember using are these ones here. These are our teaser pencils. We have pewter grey, we have charcoal grey, and this one is called storm grey. I'll try and look those up and leave the numbers down in the description. My numbers, yeah, they do wear off quite often, especially on the pencils that I use a lot. I've also got my Polychromos, the black and the white. And whenever I colour stone or any kind of rock or statue or anything along those lines, I like to bring in a little bit of green because I think that makes it look more kind of natural, because any kind of statue or rock that's out in nature does tend to get a little bit of moss or algae growing on it. So I like to bring in a little bit of green when I'm colouring statues. So 2 of the greens I've picked out, again from that bag of pencils that I use most often. This is moss from Arteza, which is A029, and the Terra Verde, that is a Castle Arts one. But any kind of desaturated sort of natural looking green would probably work, just for a little touch of green to it. And when I do colour rocks or stones, I do use both cool grey and warm grey usually. For this one I tried to keep it simple, and these are the ones that I've used. This dark charcoal grey, which is A015 I think there, that's more of a darker kind of cool grey I think, this one. The pewter grey, that's more of a warmer grey. And you can see as I'm going in with the shadows there, I'm just scribbling, that's all it is. Adding a little bit of texture just by scribbling. Kind of hard to explain the sort of motion I'm making there, it's just a scribble. So you can see there as I'm doing it on the screen, hopefully, that I'm just scribbling away and trying to get a little bit of texture going on there, just in the places you would normally shade a face. And you'll see as well that I did actually leave her eyes, the white of her eyes, I left white because I didn't want it to be fully a statue. I wanted there to be like a little glimpse of a person in there with the actual eyes. But you could go and fill in that eye with your grey and make her fully a statue. And of course, it doesn't have to be this image, any kind of image or anything like that. You could try it on a person. It doesn't have to be a person, it could be like an actual rock. It is quite a good way to make that stone texture stand out. And this is a little bit of this charcoal grey, just adding in a few shadows here. And as this is a face, I think I went in and I tried to do a little bit of a nose sort of shape. Although Jasmine's faces do end up being slightly difficult to colour, with not really a nose to speak of. And I made my light coming from the left here because it is a 3/4 face, with her face being slightly turned away. And I like to have my light coming from the side which has the most light hitting it, so I'll just add in a little bit of shadow. Again, still scribbling, keeping that texture coming in with this darkest colour here. I'm trying to look at the original to the side there to see kind of where I had my shadows going, so I can keep this as close to the original as possible. Down this side of her face here with a bit of a random scribble. Just adding in the darkest shadows. I think that's about all that I did. Yeah. And for her hair, I'm not bothering to go in with the hair strokes as I would normally. When I'm colouring hair, I go in with my hair kind of strokes like that to give the impression that we do have the lots of strands of hair making up these locks that curl away to the side. But because this is carved from stone, or we're trying to give the impression that it is carved from the stone there, we're just treating these as solid shapes. So I will add in a little bit of a shadow here. As this is carved, it would be carving up there and down here. So the bit that is down away from light, we're adding in our shadow here. And I will go ahead and do all the kind of stone texture shading before I show you how I was doing the cracks that I had appearing in the original. If we're bringing the original here, you can see that I do have some little kind of cracks coming in that I thought might make it look a little bit more as if she is carved out of the stone. So I'll go ahead and show you how I did those as well when we get on a little bit further. But I'll just add in a little bit of shading here to show that these pieces of hair are kind of carved. And this one also is carved out of the stone, a solid shape here. But because we do have the dark shadow coming underneath there, which is the same colour as I'm using here, I'm leaving a little bit of a highlight there along that edge. You can see how I'm actually doing that, hopefully. Kind of a little bit hard to explain most of this as it's just scribbling, but yeah, it's kind of more than just scribbling, if that does make sense. So I'll just carry this on along here. And that is the first colour that I used. That is the charcoal grey. I'm hoping these are the right colours that I did use. And then for a medium tone, I went in with the pewter grey. And this one is slightly a warmer grey. But whenever I do colour rocks or stones, as I said, I do like to bring in a mixture of the warm and the cool grey, because most rocks and stone does have kind of a mix of textures to it, a little mix of colour, especially if it's out in the open as a garden statue like this would be. I think I said in my finished pictures, she reminded me of the weeping angels from Doctor Who. So yeah, that kind of old, kind of creepy statue maybe look. And again, I'm coming in with this kind of scribbly texture, just scribbling. Going over the in the darker areas, I'm going over what we already did, kind of overlaying another layer of texture on top of that, because it will fill in the gaps in that darker, kind of cooler colour and help give that sort of texture. But I'm still doing the scribbly thing, kind of sometimes going circly scribbly, sometimes just random line sort of scribbly, because yeah, as I've said before, sometimes you want to do something that just reads better from a distance. That's the kind of thing I was going for. And I'm hoping this smoke grey, the third colour I have here, will actually show on top of this marker, because it is a little bit darker than the marker I had in the original Colouring Heaven, I think, which could be due to the paper. I'm not entirely sure, but I couldn't really find a lighter kind of grey in there, although these colours are ones that I do use quite often, so I could very well have used it and then have it run out. Just in these kind of areas again. And again for our hair, going over the areas we've already done, coming a little bit further up. This colour is slightly lighter, also slightly warmer. But we're still keeping the scribbling going on. And of course, as usual, as many layers, as little layers as you think would work. As soon as you've got something you're happy with, then yeah, leave it and move on. My usual idea or technique of doing anything really is pick out a few colours that I think would work and then just play around until I do have something that I am happy with, that I think I could make work, and yeah, go work like that. Probably not the best way to work, but yeah, I find it fun just to play around with the colours, see what we can have going on here. You can usually work with whatever ends up turning out, so it's all good. It's all good. The whole point is to have fun, so yeah, just go for it. Scribble away, have a bit of fun, and all it is basically is scribbling. So yeah, we've got that little bit of that texture going on, and this is the smoke grey. Yeah, am I on camera? This is the smoke grey. The colour, the name has worn off this one and the colour number, but that one is the smoke grey. And that is the last kind of colour of the grey I was going in with. Again, going over what we've already done and scribbling. That's basically all we're doing. So it's a really quick, really kind of fun effect to get something that looks like stone, at least from a distance. It looks like stone, and you can do as much of the shading or as little as you want. As I've said, you can always go in and erase if you think your lines are a little bit harsh, but because this colour does seem to be quite close to the colour of the marker, so I'm hoping this is showing up on the camera. Kind of a bit hard to tell sometimes. We're going over what we've already done. It is blending it kind of softly there to give a more softer texture in the shadows if we're going over what we've already done with this smoke grey. And yeah, as I've said, feel free to experiment. Use whatever kind of greys that you feel might work, whatever greys you have, as long as you have a light, a medium and a dark, really, we can get the same kind of texture going on. I'm just going to go over this highlight area here because this is kind of in the dark of her hair there, so we're going to go over the actual highlighted area to make it look as if there is a little bit of shadow, even in the highlighted areas. Again, I'm going to go over what we've already done, just doing scribbling so we've got that texture coming through and give a little bit of an indication that we do have the side of her nose coming in there. Did I do that on the original? I can't even remember, to be honest. All right, there we go. That's looking, yeah, I think that's looking kind of something I can work with there. It's a really quick, really kind of easy and fun thing to do, just to go in, add this little bit of texture. And especially if you're using this for a kind of background or a few rocks or something you've got going on in the background, that's not really the focus of the picture. It doesn't have to be perfect. Nobody will really be looking at it if it's way in the background. I'll come in with that pewter grey a little bit, emphasise the texture, adding a few more little scribbles. And I think it is looking pretty similar to what I have going on the other side, so yep. It's all good, it's all good. It's a really simple technique, so I don't want the tutorial to be dragging on for hours. For the very, very darkest areas, bring in the black. I think that's what I was doing. It looks as if that's what I was doing, just for the very, very darkest areas. Again, scribbling with a little bit of that black. Oh, having that dark grey there is making this black look kind of warm. More towards a reddy black it seems to be looking, but yep, for the very darkest shadows over the top. A little bit of black scribbling there. Just building up the colours so that it does feel a solid area, but there's still texture there. Hopefully that's making sense. You can see what I'm actually on about here. This statue is looking slightly darker than the one in the magazine, mainly because I think that marker underneath is darker, but you can come in as the marker is slightly darker than the one we did use. Maybe the white will show. Oh yeah, that white is showing a lot better than it did on the one in the magazine. So you can come in with the white again, and this time in the highlighted areas, just with that kind of scribbly texture. That seems to be working quite well. Just a few little hints of the white there. I would suggest maybe practicing on a printed out sheet like this, or a spare piece of paper, and having a go, seeing how it works best for you. You can obviously spend more time on it than what I'm actually doing here, trying to do a quick little tutorial. That white is helping quite a lot, I think. Just along the edges. Looking a little bit lighter on her hair there. I think that's because I didn't go in with the black. There we go. She's definitely a darker stone, this one. Again, in those darkest areas down here, keeping the white to these tops of the kind of ridges where the carving is coming out. We're trying to give a sort of 3D effect there to keep the shadows in between these sort of ridges here of her hair. Kind of half cylinders we'd have going on there. This is the smoke grey again, and again just playing with the pencils, layering the colours, seeing what kind of texture we can get going on, but I think that's working quite nicely actually. And I think usually if I just keep to grey like that, that looks a little bit flat and maybe not quite as much character as I'd like to have. So usually I tend to bring in a little bit of green, and I wasn't sure which green I did use. These were both in the bag of pencils and I know that the pencils I used for this original image, they were all in that bag. So I'm not sure if it was this moss, which is A029, or maybe this Terra Verde, which is 064. That's more of a very kind of desaturated green, that one. There is a Terra Verde Deep as well, which might work quite better in the shadows, but let's see. We'll go with this Terra Verde. We're going very lightly to add a little bit of green there, especially in the darker areas. And I think that gives it a little bit of, makes it look a little bit more natural, gives it a little bit more of a character. I'm not entirely sure this was the same green that I used on the original. Pressing slightly darker there because we are going into the shadows, and the colours we've got actually down is a little bit darker. Giving a little tiny touch of that. Let's try the moss green, see how well that one goes in the lighter areas. That one is a lot, that's a lot kind of brighter. So depending on how well you want this green to show up, how well you want your little mossy bits on your statue to be standing out, that would depend on which kind of green that you use. I'm thinking maybe a little mixture of them is working quite well there. That's making it look kind of really mossy and old there. Poor Alice, we're turning her into a statue again. But yeah, so there's something to play about with. As I said, I've used this Terra Verde, but coming in with that yellower green. It's still kind of desaturated, but more of a yellower green there on the highlighted areas, I think is working quite well. Add a little moss to this hair that we had going on here. A little bit of the lighter one. Oh, I am liking this light green, the mixture between the light green and the dark green. So this is why I play about. You do end up discovering things that you wouldn't originally have gone for if you do play around with a few different colours. Okay, yep, that's looking really stony. I'm quite happy with that. And the white gel pen, the white gel pen does end up being quite important when I do rocks and stones, because what I like to do, let's just make sure we get some white ink coming out here. I like to bring in a little bit of the scribbling with the white gel pen, but before it dries, I go in and dab it with my finger to blend that out and to go with the natural kind of stone texture, because stone isn't shiny unless you have something like marble or something polished. So there won't be any harsh highlights like my usual kind of lines and dots sort of highlights. So I like to go in before it's dry and I just dab that with my finger. It does end up being a little bit messy, but that dulls the colour, kind of blends it out a little bit, and goes quite nicely with the sort of stone texture that we were originally intending here. And for the very edges, I will bring in my usual kind of highlights like that, just to emphasize that is a nose there. And I'm quite pleased with how that's going out. Let's add in highlights on her hair there, and a little bit of the scribbly that we blend out. Getting a little bit messy there. You can see my fingers, we're getting a little bit messy there, but you can just leave as the little scribbles, depending on if you like that effect. Always entirely optional. Always encourage to play around, find out what you like. There we go, but that's the kind of effect that I was going for on my Alice picture there. And I did say I'd tell you how to do the cracks. These cracks that we have going on down her hair there. Those are super simple, really easy. The whole thing is really easy, just fun and quick. Just drawing in lines. I think I have one coming down her forehead here. I'm just putting that in with the, I think, is this a pewter grey? Yeah, it's the pewter grey. Adding that in there. We could bring it all the way down her face, actually. And as we're going over these kind of cylinders here of her hair, the crack would curve. And because we are carved, we're how to really explain that? The line will be a little bit offset. Whenever we have one of these bumps in the statue, the line would be a little bit offset. Like so, going further that way. Kind of hard to explain there, but yeah, hopefully you can see there. I might emphasize that a little bit with the black. Hopefully you can see there the line is a little bit further along there. We don't carry straight on across up that way. The line is a little bit further this way. Kind of helps with the 3D sort of effect. So we have the line coming, following the line of the actual statue we have. Or if we just want to leave it down a straight line, then yeah, none of that. Trying to finagle how it would curve around the lines of the stone there, and that could curve all the way towards the top of her head, just as we have going on the original. If I could bring them in side by side, I don't know. No, we're gonna have to look at that again. Yeah, the line is a tiny little bit offset. I was going the opposite way here for some reason. Yeah, the line is very, very slightly offset wherever it goes to touch on each part of this carving of her hair. I'm hoping I'm making sense here, but you can see, yeah, I've moved the line. It's not continuously straight. There are breaks in it where we have this carving, where it's disappearing down behind the other side of the curve there, and then kind of reappearing slightly offset. I'm hoping I'm making sense with that. And then along one edge, I think I took it along this edge, we kind of highlight to show very slightly with that white gel pen, to show that we do have a little bit of a sort of edge to this crack, like that. Again, it just sort of emphasizes that she is made of stone, and there would be like cracks and things like that happening, especially if she's left outside. And yeah, basically that is all I did to get that kind of stone texture. Maybe for these bits for hair, add in a little bit of highlighting there. Let's see if we can get these side by side here, hopefully on the screen, and see that we do have the same kind of texture going on there. Definitely the same kind of effect, and any different kind of greys that you do have, you could bring in. I've tried to keep it fairly simple, just using the 3 shades of grey there, but any different shade or tone of grey you'd like to bring in. This one has turned out slightly darker than this one. Hopefully that's showing up on camera, just a different type of stone. I think that's a lot to do with the background marker actually working out to be a lot darker for some reason. I'm pretty sure that was the same marker. It's the nearest I could find with this swatch sheet and doing my little test on the bottom. But yeah, I'll zoom us out so we can see both of these pictures together a little more clearly. There we go, I've zoomed us out a little bit more there. We can see both these pictures kind of side by side. So you can see that is the same kind of technique I was using with this one here, even though the colours may be slightly different. I can't remember exactly the pencils and the colours I was using because it was a while ago, and I really should start making notes whenever I colour a picture, but I never seem to get around to it. I think this was around about the same kind of colours that I did use. I have gone a lot darker with my shadows here and left the lights a little bit lighter, I think, from the seams of it. But the technique is the same and really quick and simple. It did seem to work quite nicely on this image here with all that rainbow in the background as a little bit of a contrast, and with something to play around with instead of just leaving the Alice kind of plain grayscale, as I think was my original plan. As we can see, I've added in a few more of the cracks here on this kind of side of her head. I've got a couple coming down her arm there as well. Exactly the same way as I did this one to show you here, just with the highlights coming in. I think I've brought in the black. I seem to have brought in the black for more darker shadows here, and I haven't gone so hard with my actual shadows in the kind of scribbly texture, but it's all good. It's something to play around with. And again, because the background kind of marker is different, obviously you're going to end up with a slightly different looking image depending on what color you do bring into the background. And as you can see there, I did try out this green grey there, so it would be interesting to see how that one would work, bringing in the greys on top of that one. Maybe there wouldn't be so much need to go on with the kind of scribbly greens to show a little bit of moss there, as the green would already be a kind of shade of the grey, so that would be interesting to maybe try or play around with in the future. But the technique would remain the same, with just the scribbling, just layers of scribbling basically. So yeah, just a quick and simple one to try and show you there, but really quite effective. And as we've zoomed out here, we can see that it does from a distance. Yeah, you can see that that is a little bit of a stone texture going on. But yeah, hopefully that was a little bit of fun for you guys today, and something you can try out and maybe play with in your colourings. If you have enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Take care, and I'll see you in future videos. Bye!